Hi everyone, so my name is Carmen and I'll be your chair for Napoleon Bonaparte Family Dinner. I'm just going to make sure everyone can see us before we get started. One second. Do some of you mind submitting a question just so I can make sure the systems are working while we wait for more people to join the webinar? That would be great. Wait, how is this? Yeah, chat. Okay, looks like a few of you are slowly joining us today, so we'll just wait for a few more people before we get started. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I just got the chat to work, so welcome all of you. Okay. So we're just waiting for a few more people to come online, and then hopefully then we'll get started. Is everyone excited for conference? Have you all done Model UN before, or is this your first time? I know when I first went to when I first started off in college for Model UN, I had no idea what I was doing, but it's definitely a fun experience. Um, okay, that's great to hear. So we have a few more people. I so I guess we'll just go ahead and get started now. So welcome everyone. My name is Carmen Abello. I'm a senior here at Penn, studying finance and public policy, and actually minoring in Korean. And so I'm really excited to be coming for my first time to India and to New Delhi, and to hope to run an amazing conference and meet all of you very soon. So in terms of our committee, Bonaparte Family Dinner, it's definitely one of the more non-traditional committees. So crisis committees in Model UN generally are very different from your General Assembly or ECOSOC, or more like traditional like debate style formats. But a crisis committee is really great. It's a more intimate setting, and it really allows for you to have a lot of fun with it. So I'm looking forward to what you guys come up with, and hope we have a great time. I just kind of want to take this webinar to address a lot of the questions you may have about a crisis committee, and specifically how to be a delegate within a crisis rather than more the traditional formats. Because obviously we want you all to be successful and come away from this learning it, but also like be slightly prepared for it coming into, like, so you know what you're sort of getting yourself into. I remember my very first Model UN committee. I had never done Model UN. I had never done crisis. I had no idea what was going on, and it's a little bit overwhelming at first. So I just want to make sure everyone has the time to like ask questions, is comfortable with it, and I'm happy to run through some of the differences in terms of parliamentary procedures, in terms of how you do notes, and how like things are passed in committee, if that definitely would help you all. So just let me know as I'm talking, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So I'm just kind of start to run through some of the differences in crisis and other committees, and like what we're really looking for. And remember, please ask questions all the time. Feel free to interrupt me. So crisis is different in that it's a much more intimate committee. You're looking at somewhere from 15 to 25 people, instead of maybe possibly up to 100 or more as you would in a GA. And so this really allows you to speak more, to have your voice heard to a greater degree, and also to be more engaged and constantly like dynamic in your responses, and how you grow and like affect the committee. And so so we actually have two rooms when we run crisis, right? We have the room that you all are in. You'll generally be seated along a table or in some sort of way facing the chair, which would be me. In this case, Napoleon Bonaparte. And in committee, you're going to be speaking and debating and writing up sorts of legislation and directives, is what we call them in crisis. But at the same time, you're also going to have an entire different room that you cannot see with a bunch of us. And our job is to respond to all your crisis notes. So constantly throughout conference, you'll be communicating with crisis by literally writing to us. And it'll be your essentially portfolio like using your portfolio powers, so your ability to change policy or take action in whatever like area of specialty that your character biography sort of allows you. And that way you can do things that happen outside a committee that may come in and affect committee, or you can pass like personal directive, which means you can do things sort of on your own within your powers, like as committee's going on. So it's kind of a lot of like things that are going on in secret as well as in the open, and it's definitely a different dynamic to sort of balance the two and make sure you're successful in committee. And so I guess to talk more about crisis notes, crisis notes are so crises are basically your line of communication to the outside world and to the rest of like your character, to unlock sort of like within their portfolio powers to really enact action. And so when you write to crisis, you're writing to whoever like your character would know that would get that thing done for you. And we're really looking for a lot of detail. So things like addressing your crisis notes to a specific person, or like adding in like really small, like adding in detail. So Joe just asked like if you're talking about an army, like, oh, can you like send us like spy to go see where this army is? Like you definitely want to come up with like an elaborate plan and really take time to write it out a bit. And the more detail you have in your crisis notes, the more likely this is going to be passed. So I think last week, Ashil, who was going to be your crisis director, which is essentially my analog on the other secret room we have going on for committee, I think he talked a little bit more about what we're looking for. But if you have any questions, please definitely feel free to ask. I'm happy to elaborate about them more, because that's something that's very different from other types of committee. Yeah, so I don't see any questions as of yet, so I'll just kind of keep going, but please feel free to ask. And then in terms of the types of debate you have in committee, right? Just like in terms of an overview, it's going to be more back and forth. We don't have a speakers list like you would in a general assembly. So you're pretty much going to be raising your placard and I'll be calling on people multiple times during a caucus, so usually a moderated caucus, to express their opinions and try to get their voice heard and try to affect how committee is going. And at the end of the day, we're all here for the debate, right? So that's definitely a crucial part, and it's important not to only speak in committee and be vocal and have your voice heard, but also to be active on the other side in crisis as well. So it's definitely this like two-pronged like approach to being a good delegate within a crisis committee that may be different from something you've seen in the past. I had a couple notes on things that would be helpful, so I'll pull those up for you. So in terms of the type, like the modes of debate. So what I mentioned, like when you are speaking, debating, maybe like a moderated caucus is one example. Basically, a moderated caucus is like everyone's given a set amount of time. You express your ideas in that time, and it goes to the next person to speak. So that's a very regulated form of debate. And it's very easy to request a moderated caucus. So when I'm asking for points or motions, which are essentially like what you want to do next in committee in terms of how you're going to like communicate with each other, you can say I motion for a moderated caucus, and you want to say how long the moderated caucus is. So I motion for 10 minutes moderated caucus with, say, a minute speaking time, or 30-second speaking time is usually pretty good to allow people to sort of set like what moderated caucus for, and then you always have to set a topic. So it's like, I want to set a 10-minute moderated caucus with a 30-second speaking time to discuss the potential for a rebellion among the farmers because of a poor harvest. So you really make sure you target committee on like what you want to talk about, and it's a great way to sort of start to have your voice heard, especially since the person who motions for a moderated caucus or anything is usually the first person to speak. So that's the first point. And then in crisis, you also have unmoderated caucus, which is different, I guess, is where a lot of sort of the collaboration and some of the scheming happens in committee. And so for an unmoderated caucus, so that's where we're really looking to see like who's working together, like how are you working together, whether you're getting stuff passed. So you like to see something really productive at the end of that. Okay, wait, I see some people are using the chat, so I'm going to pull that up. Okay, so I see we kind of have a mix of people who know Parley Pro, as well as some who like aren't unfamiliar with how Crisis Committee runs. So I'm just going to like really quickly run over high level, like some of the more common Parley Pro, and then talk about how the dynamic of committee works, so that we sort of make sure we address everyone. And so the last sort of form of debate for a crisis is a round robin. So if you motion for a round robin, that means everyone in order goes around the room and says what they think about a topic. So that's usually a really great way to start committee, and I hope someone will motion for it when we begin committee in the coming weeks. So let's see, and then just kind of when I ask for motions, you usually vote on motions in sort of order, so that's this precedent. So you vote on motions to vote first, so voting procedures come first, then round robins, then unmoderated caucuses from long to short, then moderated caucuses from like the most speakers to the fewest number of speakers. So that's sort of the order in which we dictate how like the next procedurally like committee will run. And so if you keep that in mind, like if you're motioning for things, we'll always hear like whatever is in precedence like first. So if you really want to make sure that your topic is addressed, like maybe try to focus on something that either has a longer like moderate caucus, or like maybe doing a round robin if you feel like it comes necessary, because you vote on that first. That's a great way to sort of get to sort of influence committee from the get-go. And then let's see, in terms of like more of the crisis side, what you'll see from us is that we'll communicate from you via the crisis notes. We'll communicate via you from press releases, as well as updates to your directives. So definitely expect some good acting, potentially with props. And definitely you'll see crisis staff on our side come into the room and explain what the situation currently is. So crisis is a lot of like bombarding you with different types of things going on at once, and you have to prioritize what you're dealing with, like what matters to the committee, what you think was like most important, address it, while as well addressing some of the longer term issues that you have. So specifically for Bonaparte's Family Dinner, you're looking at Bonaparte having a fair amount of success in Europe already, and really looking to expand his empire as much as possible. But at the same time, you have this issue where if you expand too quickly, or you neglect the countries that you've already conquered, that you have the potential for rebellion or some domestic issues. So you want to make sure that you focus on sort of your domestic policy as well as international policy, and that's sort of like where this duality of like what do you prioritize first comes in. And so that's definitely something that you'll see a lot of during crisis. And okay, let me just make sure I'm addressing all of you. Okay, and then so in terms of how this all comes together, over the few days that we spent together on this topic, you'll sort of see that based on the actions you choose, committee will go a certain way. So we have no idea how committee is going to end up. That's really up to you. And one of the great parts about being in a crisis committee is like even if you run the same like committee, like every time it's completely different. Like the things that people bring up, what people prioritize, what the issues are, will definitely like create different reactions from our staffers and create different updates for you, which is really great. But you'll definitely see that overall it'll be sort of an arc, and it'll culminate in sort of one final either standoff or issue or debate, and like that will generally set the tone for like the success or like the failure of how you do as Napoleon Bonaparte's trusted like advisors and family, and whether like you succeed in like the endeavors we've set out before you. So that's sort of like more high level how sort of it all comes together for a crisis. Definitely, please don't be intimidated. What's really great about crisis is that if you've never done it before and you're willing to sort of get in there and speak and like go out there, it's very easy to adapt to. So this is a high school conference. It's a learning conference, and I definitely expect to see some of you, like if you have come in doing Model UN, I expect to see more from you than someone who's just done this for the first time ever. So definitely don't be afraid, and even during committee, like say you don't know really what's going on, like you're very confused as to how something is working, you're like not really sure, there are definitely other like Parley Pro, which is parliamentary procedures, that'll help you like ask questions. So if you have like a point of information or like a point of privilege, like definitely feel free to do that in like the lulls of committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions about like how this specific point of Parley Pro works, how like what like crisis means at this time in terms of like what you should be doing, because I definitely recognize that some of you may not be completely sure, and like I definitely wasn't when I started a crisis, don't worry. And so definitely please feel free to ask questions throughout committee as well, not just through this webinar. Yeah, and let's see, what else should we talk about? So as I mentioned, you have these two jobs in committee, right? So you want to be working with the committee and debating and writing directives, and these are committee directives. So what we're really looking to see is that you guys produce like not necessarily like legislation, but guidance on and like writing out actions that you want your body to take within its powers. So committee directives will mean that someone will pass around a paper and people will collaborate on terms of their ideas and what they want to do. So say you're going to do something militarily and you're going to send troops to from you're going to send troops from like one country to another. Like you want to outline like how many troops you're sending, when you want to send them, how they're going to get there, who's going to lead them, where the resources are going to come from, like maybe how the supply chain will run behind them. So just make sure like you add in as like try to add as much detail as you can to your committee directives, because that'll give us more like richer information for us to work with in order to give you like cooler updates and like have a better sense of exactly what you want. And the more detail you add into things, the more successful they can potentially become. And definitely it's like one of the great parts of crisis that you're able to sort of talk about topics at like such like a small level, like it might like even into the details, because you have this very quick back and forth setting, so you can discuss a lot of the nuances of what you're doing, while still being able to in a sort of timely amount like in the quick amount of time like take action as a body. And so that's sort of what we're like looking physically in terms of like paperwork from you in committee. And then outside of committees, I mentioned you're going to be writing crisis notes back and forth with the crisis staff to sort of move your own personal crisis track along. So like we'll have an idea of what we maybe think will happen in committee, and you as a body you all work on that to shape like where that will go. But at the same time, each of you is a delegate competing, and you're acting sort of your own self-interest as a character. And so we definitely want to see you trying to advance a personal crisis track. So like what is your character want out of committee, and how can you best accomplish that via your own sort of like events outside of committee that may actually either deviate or coincide with what's going on in committee. So definitely that's sort of like so when you definitely sort of like the kind of paper we want to see from you like product wise, and when you're writing to crisis, I mentioned you're going to have your personal directives, which you're going to put detail into outlining like what you want to do. So say you like say we're doing a committee where you're like the head of central intelligence or something, and you wanted to send a spy. Like since that's within your portfolio powers, you can outline exactly like who you want to send, when you want to send them, essentially add in all the details you would if it were a community directive. But this is personal, so it's only known to you, and it's kind of secret between you and crisis. But definitely, if you don't add in enough detail, and make sure you like tell like the spy how to cover their tracks, like that may actually come out in committee and could affect what's going on as you're debating with your peers. So like your interaction with the crisis room is definitely one of the cool components of crisis, and it's a really dynamic format that I love, and I'm so excited for all of you to get the chance to experience with us. So I'm just, if you have any, okay, so I got a question here. Could you clarify the difference between directives, crisis notes, press releases, and communiques? Yes. So as I mentioned, you have the community directives, which you as a body will pass. Generally, you'll need a certain quorum, so a certain percentage of people to pass. And then your personal directives, which is the directive just that you need to like write to crisis, and that's between you and the crisis room. But you also have crisis notes, which are like kind of quick like communication between you and crisis. So that could be asking them a question like, how much money do I have at my disposal to work on this endeavor, and like if not, maybe where could I get it? Or even you can like ask like, if I did this, could I gain enough like resources to do this action? So definitely like that's more that the questions back and forth and information seeking, right? And then like when you actually tell them to do something, that's a personal directive. It doesn't have to say like, this is my personal directive titled at the top. It's kind of assumed that any action that you write, like literally write to crisis, when you request for an action, that is a personal directive. And usually we'd like to see that it's longer, it's full of detail. And I'm happy to go more into that if you guys let me know that that's something you would prefer. And then in terms of press releases, there you'll see several types of press releases. There are press releases that will come from us that may be some sort of newspaper title, or like a press release based on a response to something you passed in committee, how it's going in like in the lands that you reign over, in the Napoleonic Empire. Or it could be something that you're just like hearing about. It's like breaking news that we're letting you know about. So that's press releases from our side. And then you have press releases from your side, which is a type of sort of like directive that you can pass, where you as a body would want to send out a press release to the public, so to, I guess, the peasants and inhabitants of the Napoleonic Empire, telling them about something. And like that kind of goes through the same process as you would a community directive, where someone writes it down, it has to meet a quorum, generally you'll discuss it, it has to be passed, and then we'll send it to crisis, they'll send it out to the rest of the Napoleonic Empire, and then we'll get back to you on how it's going, and like it'll be formally read. And so that sort of press release is on your side. And then in terms of communiques, so communiques are when you as a committee and a body want to send a formal communication, so communication, to a specific person. So say you wanted to send a communique to a president or to some sort of like legal advisor, to a specific figure in history. Maybe you want to send it to the Pope, and you're requesting something of them. So like, could we request your presence to discuss XYZ? Like, this is why we really want to talk to you. And if so you write that up as you would a community directive. It's a form of directive in a sense. It has to be passed. It'll then be sent to crisis. Crisis will determine if that person is available, if you've included enough detail for us to warrant bringing that person to your committee. So sometimes you'll actually see like our crisis staff say, okay, the communique has been received, this figure has agreed to come, and they'll come and dress up and come into committee, and that allows you sort of a live Q&A with that person. So they'll generally speak a little, and then have a set number of questions that they'll allow asked. Choose on people. You can ask questions within in front of the entire committee, and usually this is used like when you need to consult someone about something, like you want to it's more like information seeking, and making sure that you're kind of taking the right direction in committee. So definitely, if you want to use that resource and that sort of motion, that is something available to you, and it'd be definitely it makes our life kind of fun. Like I know like the crisis staff really gets into things like this, and we really love like crisis because it allows you to do these cool things. So that's definitely something you might see in committee. And definitely, like, if someone starts talking about a communique and you have no idea what's going on in committee, remember, just like feel free to raise your hand, like have like point of information, and I'm happy to explain anything to make sure we're all on the same page as we're progressing through committee. So definitely don't worry too much. And I know this is a lot of different things that are sort of throwing at you now, but I just kind of want to like expose everyone to the ideas so that when you come to conference, you have sort of a vague understanding of how it's working, and then within the first hour or two of committee, it'll start to become more apparent, and as people sort of figure out their way, we'll start to pick up more pace. So don't worry if you don't understand everything 100% completely right now, like no worries, and like you can definitely succeed in committee without like knowing the intricacies of like how a committee works, because you'll learn that as we go. So, okay, I've addressed that question. Let's see. What are we going to discuss about in the committee? So, definitely I encourage you all to read the background guide. That'll be your best indicator of the things that could come up. What's different about a crisis versus maybe a general assembly or something where there's like a set topic is like, well, we have a topic. It's the Bonaparte Family Dinner, and you have all this background information about Napoleon and these different areas that he reigned over and what's going on in that time. Really look to the background guide, because we'll definitely be throwing a lot of surprises at you, and crisis is very much how you think on your feet, how you address issues that you maybe had an inkling might come up or I didn't really realize would come up. So we're not looking that you have everything perfectly researched and are so aware of that. We're more looking at how you interact with the people around you to be successful in the face of these pressing crises that are very immediate and very sudden. So like, while we're definitely going to discuss things like how to ensure that Napoleon like maintains rule over his the pieces of his empire as he expands, like that's the kind of great idea that he's trying to address in this family dinner and make sure that his empire is successful. the events of the committee will not follow the course of history. So once we start committee, just you can throw out the history books, use them for inspiration, but everything is subject to what you pass in committee and how you deal with everything. So it's not like you're going to know exactly what's in committee before then, but definitely read the background guide, because the people who wrote that will kind of write in like hints to what they are. So if they talk about certain parts of the economy, or they talk about certain groups of people, like read up on that and be like try to think about what we could do with that might affect committee, because that's something that potentially that we can have come up, or that even you and like your own personal crisis tracks of the crisis room could make prominent enough that it might actually come into committee. So that's sort of, I guess, in terms of what we're going to discuss about in committee. It's kind of a mixture of like, it's a surprise and read the background guide. And I know that may not be the answer you wanted, but like, that's definitely, crisis like keeps you on your feet. It's a great dynamic form of debate, and as I mentioned, like I love it, and I hope you all will too. Okay, so I think I addressed all of the questions so far. And if I haven't, or if you want further clarification, please feel free to use the chat. I'm on here as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions as we go about like crisis. I've kind of covered in general like some of the parley pro of crisis, and like the kinds of like types of like directives and whatnot that you'll see in committee. But like definitely I'm happy to elaborate on those further. Or talk about maybe like what like we hope to see in a delegate. Like I'm not really sure exactly what you all like what would all be like best for you all to make sure that you get the best the most out of this like this webinar experience, and like ask the questions you want to before committee actually begins. So definitely okay, so please give us examples of how you would work in a crisis committee. Okay, so there are. So you as a delegate, in terms of like what you're literally doing, you're like, as I'm calling for speakers, say we're in a moderated caucus, you're gonna have your placard held up high so I can call on you. You'll be listening to the other people around the room speak, whether it's 30 seconds or a minute or 45 seconds, and hear them with their opinions. You'll also probably be simultaneously writing, like either writing up a personal directive, an inquiry to crisis, writing up a community directive, writing down maybe your thoughts, reading through some of your notes. So you're multitasking all the time. I mean, definitely pay attention to the people around you and engage in debate, but like you're not going to have separate time to work on these things in terms of writing. And on mods will be pretty quick and pretty eventful. So make sure that you're kind of doing like starting to try to manage a lot of these things at once. I apologize, I'm a little sick. And then in terms of things you could be doing in terms of action, so say you're writing to crisis, like there are different kinds of crisis notes and like interactions you'll have with crisis. So the first is, so I guess like kind of 4 general categories would be like when you're creating contacts, when you're sort of laying groundwork, when you're putting like your plans into action, and then when you're targeting other delegates. So in terms of creating contacts, this is the first. It's generally like literally the first note you'll send to crisis. Sometimes you can create it like a character, like the crisis will create a character to like do your like bidding almost, and you'll figure out who is sort of your guy on the other side, and like behind the scenes, and it'll be setting up like who you communicate with. So this could be a chief of staff, this could be a wife, this could be a mistress, this could be some character in this sort of universe, like this like character universe in this committee that we're in, that you're going to be communicating with, like who you're literally writing to sort of enact all your endeavors. And then you can essentially reach out into the world for anything. So say you're taking an action, you can send out a note contacting someone else like personally as a crisis, as a crisis note, to start a dialogue with them to see maybe if they can help you with something. So that's sort of the first kind of maybe crisis note that you'll see. Then you have sort of laying the groundwork. So this is when you're using the contacts that you establish to sort of work on like the groundwork for a bigger plan. So this is like either creating more contacts, reaching out to more people to help, setting up a source of funding, so figuring out where you're going to get your money, hiring troops if that's under your portfolio powers. You can create unrest, so you can definitely cause some mayhem behind the scenes. And this could also mean bribing or blackmailing people. So definitely, like, crisis allows you a lot of like really fun things you can do. And then you, like, as I mentioned, you have this sort of personal crisis track you're pushing. So the third kind of like node interaction, like the thing you should be doing is putting your plan into action. So using this groundwork that you've like established to really accomplish some large objective. And so, like, if you're so we're really looking to make sure that your crisis nodes go somewhere, and you can definitely see this if, like, say it impacts committee, and maybe like things that you do in crisis will be broadcast to committee and become topics in committee and like really become known and become discussed. And this really shows us that you're like engaging and definitely brings sort of like behind the scenes and like what's going on in the conference room together. And so this, like, examples of this could be taking over a country and going rogue, ending some sort of like period or measure. So like if we were in the U.S. In history, we could be like ending prohibition as an example, but that's definitely like not particular to this committee. Don't want to give too much away. It could be creating some sort of new government or system. It could be that there's so many different things you could do, and it really depends. It's up to your creativity, and like that's sort of like how things culminate. And then the sort of the last sort of like note or action you would take in terms of crisis behind the scenes would be maybe targeting other delegates. So these are things like assassinations or investigations, launching like that could be setting like a spy or setting some sort of people behind the scenes to figure out what's going on so you could take action later. It could be kidnappings. And definitely, like, these are things that will need to be approved. So if everyone says a note to assassinate everyone else, like, it's not going to happen because we need you guys in committee, and we can't create new characters for all of you in the case that you're assassinated, which does happen every once in a while. But definitely, like, the more detail you add, the more it makes sense in your greater plan. Like, these are all things that'll allow these sort of fun, like, actions that you're taking to more likely be allowed by the crisis director. So remember that, like, everything you ask for may not be given, so don't be afraid to ask for a lot, because, like, we may give you something else in return, right? So that's sort of what you'll see on the crisis side. Let me just make sure. And then, hold on. Okay, and then when you're working in committee physically, so not via these crisis notes or not like behind the scenes, you're, I guess, like I said, working on those community directives. You're working on like exchanging ideas and like really come to solutions like during debate. And these are like short-term ad hoc solutions for problems we'll throw at you. So it's not like a GA, well, you'll end up in a paper at the end. Like there's no working paper or anything like that. You'll have like mini sort of like papers or community directives that you're passing to sort of like plug up an issue, and then like if that's effective, maybe it like that sort of will end that like kind of line of like thought, but like it may come back as a greater thing, or like, so really it's constantly addressing a lot of little things together as a committee swiftly. Okay, so so that should address that question. What should our policy be towards our fellow delegates? So this person is a prisoner and thinking about cooperation. Okay, so we're definitely not looking for everyone to try to be attacking everyone else. We're really looking for a lot of cooperation as a committee, but like also do remember it is a competition, and like people naturally have self-interest in mind, even as your character vows, right? So like each of these people were probably working together for a cause, for something, but also at the same time had their own personal agenda. So what we really like to see is that in the committee room, you're working with people either compromising or collaborating or trying to figure out solutions to your own issues, while at the same time you may be enacting a crisis track within, like, via crisis notes that are more self-interested. So, and also when you communicate with crisis, you can do so jointly behind the scenes. So say you and the delegate sitting next to you want to collaborate on something, but don't want to collaborate with the rest of the committee, either because you're at odds, you have a dissenting opinion or something. You too can write a joint personal directive to crisis to try to get something done. So excuse me, it doesn't have to be like just you in crisis, and it doesn't have to be the entire committee and the chair. So there are different ways you can sort of cooperate, or leave alliances to sort of figure out what works for you to advance your personal agenda as well as the committee's agendas. Because if everyone on their own accomplished exactly what they personally wanted, the committee would go nowhere. But at the same time, we don't want everyone to be so in agreement and so cooperative that like there's no argument or debate over some of the finer like nuances or topics or even what course of action you should take. So this is definitely what we're looking for in terms of cooperation. And sort of how you navigate this as a committee, because like you're definitely going to make friends among among the delegates, so we want to see that like those relations are coming out, that you are cooperating, but at the same time we also want to see that you are being successful in the character that you were given. Okay. Okay, so is it considered bad if we don't actually follow history? No, we do not want to see you carbon copy history. Like, what would be ideal is that if that a history so deviated because you were either so successful or unsuccessful in whatever you're proposing personally or as a committee. So we love that crisis is going to be different than history. And that's one of the great things about it, how it is dynamic. You don't know what's happening, even though like this may have already happened in the past. So like in regards to the question that was asked, like that's definitely something that could be your personal crisis track, right? So that you could be like, my goal is to, here it says like control South Africa, like that could be a very good like personal crisis track goal, and make sure that in your notes with committee you're creating the context, or setting the groundwork, or maybe taking small actions that sort of play into a larger plan to accomplish that behind the scenes. That's definitely the kind of thinking that we're looking for. So will I be Napoleon Bonaparte or delegate? I will be Napoleon Bonaparte. So, okay. So as your chair, I'm definitely going to be generally hands off, in that I'm going to allow you all to debate. I'm not going to be speaking my mind. What this is Napoleon Bonaparte wanting to hear what you all think, so that like committee can go as planned. So generally, like don't look to me to say like what I think, because that's not something I'll be doing. Like what we really want to hear is what each of you think, and how you all can advise me via passing these community directives onto what I should do. So like we're assuming Napoleon generally listens to his advisors, or at least like that it creates a reaction out of him and crisis staff. So like a delegate will not be Napoleon, I will be Napoleon. That's a lot of portfolio powers to give one person. The crisis tracks have to be something under portfolio powers. Like, yes and no. Like, you can't do something so... Like, you can't send a crisis note saying, I want to take over South Africa, I want to become the new president. Like, that's not going to happen. What is going to happen is if you have portfolio powers and you enact a lot of small actions that lead up to you gaining power. So, like, you may gain portfolio powers through your interaction with the crisis. So say you said, like, okay. Say you accomplish one thing, like maybe setting up funding and like creating some sort of body, like whether it's like a government body or legislative body or something, or some sort of like advisor or counselor or something like that. Like that may, if that goes through, that may give you more power in that region. So say then you pass measures like you're addressing some of the issues that people in that region like want personally by like things you're doing behind the scenes in crisis. Like that may slowly gain you more popularity with like the local inhabitants and whatnot, and like it may eventually set up the groundwork for you to be able to take those steps to later like maybe take over that like an area. So definitely like you want to start within things with your portfolio powers, but your powers will grow throughout committee. It's not so clear cut. It's like, what can you get away with based on what you've done already? So it's always like really pushing like the envelope, like asking for more, doing more, but being really detailed and very like really thinking through like logically like what could happen, like what do you need to do to make this happen. Okay. So if that answers your question, if that doesn't answer your question, please let me know. I can elaborate on it a little further. Wow, I apologize. Please, so we have a couple minutes left. Please let me know if there's anything else really pressing that you want me to address. I'm happy to talk about like my personal experience with Model UN, like any like anything like related to like committee, how it's going to be run, what you should do before to prepare. Like really, like if you like have any questions, let me know. I mean, I guess in general, like we're really looking for like what we're looking for in a delegate is definitely something people are always wondering in committee. So it'll be like in terms of like how awards are determined, it'll be myself as well as the crisis director and the crisis staff. So at the end of each committee session, we all kind of get together and talk about what happened, who did what, who talked about these things, what points did they bring up, and really evaluate at the end of each committee session how everyone in the room did. And so you want to show that you're consistently strong or even like progressively getting better throughout committee. So we're looking for either of those things, right? And then what we're actually looking at in terms of like how you're going to be successful at these things, like we want to see that you are cooperating, working in committee, that you're passing these directives, that you're using these aspects of parliamentary procedure to your benefit, that you're sort of doing all the things I touched on in this webinar, and that you're doing them well. So we want to see that you're using a lot of detail, that you're bringing up points that like maybe other people haven't brought up again. Like you're not just speaking to speak, but you're speaking to say something, to really have your voice heard. So like really we want to see that you're able to succeed in this format of debate. And then on the crisis side, we're looking to see that you show the depth and the breadth of the type of notes that I've been talking about. So that you like appropriately set up contacts and lay the groundwork and have like some sort of personal crisis track and like set like and like go to some personal agenda as well. Like we want to see that you're doing all of these things and that you're doing them all like decently well, right? So like we don't want to see someone who always talks in committee that has great ideas and that never raised a crisis. Like that will I can tell you they will not get an award. At the same time, we don't want to see someone who's only hunched over writing and has the best personal crisis track and does all these cool things but never voices their opinion in committee. So we're looking for a delicate balance of you like looking after your personal interests within crisis, as well as you like working in the committee, cooperating with the delegates, and really getting things done and addressing these issues immediately. So like I guess in terms of like what I've been trying to cover today, sort of like how crisis works, like familiarizing you with it so that you are aware of the different components that you have to essentially like fulfill and that they're available to you to make sure you're successful in the crisis room, because we're definitely looking for a delegate who can utilize sort of all of this to their advantage within this topic. Okay, so the preparations for a historical crisis committee. So definitely read the background guide, look into the history to get to have familiarity with like the legal bodies that you have access to, like maybe the personalities of these people, how they work together, like what kinds of things happen in that time period, like what sort of technology is available to your advantage. Essentially knowing the time and like the environment and like this sort of like character and story universe and history is more of a background for what you can come up with in committee. So like it's like spontaneous creativity to the extent, but it's also an extent of like thinking beforehand, what sorts of things can I do? So a good way to think about it is like maybe like one of my favorite things to do in a crisis room is to kind of think about the kinds of technology available, whether it's like the types of ships, the type of warfare instruments, and think about how if something happened in committee, maybe I could use that to my advantage. So when it happens, I already have that idea in the back of my head, and I can pull it from a bunch of things I was thinking about in terms of like within the realm of possibility to actually address something. So that'll definitely like as how you want to use your research to your advantage, with like more you understanding better the world in which you're working in, so that you can use these different things to help you and to more quickly address things in committee or in terms of your personal crisis tracks. Yeah. So, and then, I mean, definitely, I like you guys have a couple of you mentioned you've walked into committees with absolutely no research. You may think that you're doing okay, but we can tell. because a lot of us had poured time into studying the topic, figuring out, like, planning, like, this couple of days for you, things that may appear, things that we want to appear, that we want you to address. So, like, we have a pretty good understanding of what's going on, and it's very clear, like, when you don't do your research before committee. And I will say that, like, because we're evaluating every single session how you're doing, people who come prepared the first and second sessions tend to make greater impressions. And so, like, yes, you may be able to do well by session 4 or 5 without having done the research, but we can tell in sessions 1, 2, and 3 that you haven't. So really take the time to at least read the background guide, and, like, even if you're not, like, pouring and doing a ton of reading, like, it's more so, like, research and prepare by thinking about how you can use what you've read already in the background guide to your advantage, or that the things you can maybe do in committee. So, like, preparation isn't just research and, like, becoming like aware of, like, the history, but also thinking creatively, kind of on your own time, to, like, think of what could happen and how you could solve it. So, okay. What is the basic criteria for judging a delegate? So we don't have a rubric. This isn't an assignment where we have all these boxes that you need to check. The boxes that we do need to check are that you speak in committee and you have good thoughts, and you voice those thoughts and you're able to maybe sway committee to your favor, as well as that you do well in the crisis room in terms of your crisis notes, that they're detailed, that you have a crisis arc, that you have a track that you're trying to do, a personal agenda that you're trying to achieve, and the success that you experience in both. So as you can tell, it's definitely a very subjective thing. We're really looking to make sure that you succeed in like, as many aspects as possible of being a crisis delegate. So you, like, even if you've been successful in a GA before and you walk into a crisis room and you're a great debater, that may not mean that you're successful in the crisis room. So we really want to make sure that within the scope of what we're discussing, so like Napoleon's Empire, as well as within the scope of how, like, this Model UN committee, like, literally functions procedurally as in a crisis, that that you do well in both of those aspects. Okay. Well, we have challenges in a crisis committee constantly. Every hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, you'll have a new thing that you have to deal with. So whether that could be something domestically, that could be something in one area of the empire, that could be that could be politics within the body, that, like, within your committee even. There's so many different challenges and things that'll come to you. You'll have updates from crisis and constant things you need to address. And, like, the whole part is it's supposed to be challenging. And we want to see how will you all, both individually and as a body, deal with those challenges and how you react. So this is a great format. It's a lot of fun. I can promise you'll be surprised. The crises will not all be related to the events and the wars and the crises that happened in the 1800s. Some of them will. Some of them will be completely imaginary and creative, and maybe make sense given what you do. So maybe the first committee or two, things will kind of align with history. But, like, based on what you do, we create a new history, right? So, like, we have a new set of, like based on the actions you take, that'll change, like, the kinds of things that'll pop up in the later committee sessions. So it all kind of comes together that way. Okay. Excuse me. I think my contact info is either on the background guide of the website, and then if you have, like, definitely, like prepare on your own, and I'm happy when we get, like, to conference to answer any questions or take time at the very start of committee to address a lot of these concerns. And if you have any questions about, like, ILMUNC India, like, logistically, procedurally, I think, like, that the Honor Ranching, the section, like, her info should be on the website, and definitely look to that as your resource into who you should contact for what event, like, what sort of situations. Yeah, so okay, so definitely, like, keep in mind that you're going to have things going on in terms of I remember just like when we're judging as a delegate, it's like how you speak in committee, how you pass legislation in committee, these directives, as well as how you like communicate with crisis, how you pass your own personal directives on it. So we're looking at both. So I think that's like what some of this commentary is about. Okay, so I think that addresses most of your questions, and our time is pretty much up. But I'm so excited to be your chair and be running this committee, and I'm so excited to meet you all. Every crisis is like very different, and even having run crises at different conferences that are like the same topic, I can assure you that the result and the events and everything is so totally different. It's a very rewarding experience and a ton of fun. And so definitely get prepared for some of the best Model UN experiences you'll have. I've never been to ILMUNC India, but I've heard it's fun. It's a great time, and I definitely have. This will actually be my 6th or 7th time chairing a committee. So I've chaired at our like high school and college conference in Philadelphia, as well as a conference in Beijing before for the International Affairs Association for Penn Model UN, and so I like definitely like each committee is so much fun, so rewarding, and so different. And I hope that you all will have as much fun as I have. So anyway, thank you so much for everything, and I hope this was helpful. And so this pretty much concludes our webinar. We're out of time, but I look forward to seeing you on committee.